Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I am Jody from Maine Parent Federation. I'm one of the parent trainers here in Southern Maine, and we're going to try something new today. This is our newest workshop called S.M.A.R.T Goals. And we're going to take a closer look at individualized education programs and what well-written goals are going to look like. So bear with us because this is the first time that we're doing this one. We would really love feedback and participation as we're kind of testing it out here. We're actually not going to stream live on Facebook today because we're kind of using this as a test group. So again, any kind of feedback you have for us is really appreciated. And you can feel free to put any comments or questions right in the chat box. Everybody is automatically muted and video is off because it's in webinar format, but we would love to hear from you in the chat box. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dylan.
So hi, everybody. My name is Dylan. I'm a parent trainer here at Maine Parent Federation. And today we're just going to take a look at, writing SMART goals and kind of, recognizing when a well-written goal versus a non-well-written goal. So as Jody had mentioned, if you're not familiar with us, last week we did a presentation on our general special education workshop, Education is Special, and that takes a look at what special education is here in Maine, and it kind of breaks down some of the terms that you would hear more commonly. It goes over a couple of the basic laws and just breaks it down a bit more. So today we're going to look at kind of taking it a next step further and kind of recognizing when a goal is well written. Just as a reminder, all of this information was developed prior to the COVID pandemic. However, everything should still remain true. So this slide here just explains that we are not a legal service agency and we cannot actually provide legal advice or legal representation. So kind of just think of this as a public service for general information only. And today we're going to understand the purpose of the IEP goals. And those are the goals written inside the individualized education program. And then we're going to talk about understanding the process of developing IEP goals. And we're not expecting parents to, become experts at writing goals today. However, we are just going to look at goals and differentiating from a well-written goal versus a non-well-written goal. And then we're going to understand the effect of having SMART goals. And that SMART acronym stands for specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-limited. So if you feel comfortable, in the chat box, what has been your experience developing IEP goals?
I can say as a parent, there's been times where it's confusing. There's been times where I feel like, I know exactly what I want the goal to be, but I don't really know how to get there for my son. I have a 16-year-old who's in special education. And so we've been doing the IEP process for a long time. And so this is a point where if we were in person with you guys, we would be having a little bit of give and take, but I know this is a different format. So
have you had a good experience so far? Have you had a team approach? I'm not sure if we have anything in the chat box, Jody. I can't see that.
I don't see anything.
Anyways, that's just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. What has been your experience so far developing IEP goals?
Dylan, just to interrupt, we've got something in the box from Amelia. She says, it's been so confusing. I feel the same as Jody. I know what I want my daughter to work on, but I don't know how to apply it to IEP goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your input. I know a lot of us kind of struggle with that, where we go, we know generally where we want our kids to go and where we want them to spend their time working, but we don't necessarily know how to get there in the goals.
Hopefully today helps provide some tips to make that a reality. Okay, I'm going to move forward now. And we're just going to kind of break down an IEP goal and what the purpose is. So the purpose of an IEP goal, just at the most basic level, is to fulfill the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requirements. And IDEA is a federal law that provides access to a free and appropriate public education, also known as a FAPE. Lost my place. So a free and appropriate public education means a child is entitled to receive an education at no cost to the parent in a public setting. And this includes all aspects of the school day, not just the academic. So this includes unified arts such as, physical education, music, and art. And this is to ensure that children with disabilities are provided with the necessary services and accommodations. So, and again, this little note at the bottom, if some of these references sound unfamiliar to you, we do go into way more detail in our Education and Special workshop. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, it is uploaded on our YouTube and our Facebook, and we will be offering it soon again, live. So if some of these terms seem unfamiliar to you, just leave a note in the chat box and we'll try to address you. But that's also another resource. So I have a quote here that I saw earlier this morning, and I thought it just kind of really fit in with what we're talking about today. And that is, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I think that goes so well with what we're talking about today, because we're talking about goals, but how do you really get to a goal if you don't have a plan, the middle steps? So a goal is to create a long-term plan for achieving academic and functional growth within the school setting. So you really want to consider the big picture, take a step back and look at how can you write this goal to provide provide achievement in these settings. As Jody will break down in a few slides, there are objectives included within the goals to outline the specific steps towards meeting those goals. So how do you get there? So when referring to IEP goals, the goal should address the student's academic and functional performance and align with the general curriculum per the Maine learning results. So the Maine learning results are state standards and expectations for students K through 12 in Maine. Academic goals refer to how the student's disability impacts his or her participation in learning within the general curriculum. However, the functional goals address how the student conducts their day in relationship to their communication, social emotional skills, motor, cognitive, and adaptive areas. So where is your child currently at? So goals are meant to describe the present level of academic achievement and functional performance, PLAF, or present level of performance, PLOP. So you will hear those terms a lot, often as the acronym PLOP itself. So PLAF or PLOP is determined based on the following: recent evaluations and assessments, classroom observations, participation, and work. So really, all of the child's data is collected and taken into consideration. It also creates specific measures to support progress in academic and functional performance. So again, referring back to that quote, how can we support the progress and how do we track the progress? How can we change the environment and address the goal and better suit the child? And here are a couple examples. I will hand it over to Jody now to explain a bit more.
So this is the template that the Maine Department of Education uses to create IEPs. This is an example of the academic portion of the goals. So every child's IEP is written on the same form, and this is the blank template. And you can look at right down on the second line there where it says present levels of academic performance. That's what Dylan was just referring to. And that is what the goals will be based on. That's how we're going to determine where to go, is based on those present levels. And then there's a spot to design the actual measurable goal. And then underneath that is the objective. And so again, this is just a template. On the right-hand side, the progress will be outlined. So when to expect updates should be outlined right within that throughout the year. And we can go to the next slide and it'll actually be filled out. So that was the template. And then here we've actually taken an actual IEP and we've blurred out any kind of identifying information. But this is what it looks like when it's filled out. So again, this is one of the academic goals. We look at the present level of academic performance here, and it's written out nicely so that we can tell where the student is. And I won't read through all of the jargon, but basically, you know, it's a very specific snapshot of where the student's performance is. And based on that present level of academic performance, we move down to where it says measurable goal there. And that information is used to write the goal. So this one says, by January 2021, given specially designed instruction in the areas of mathematical skills, blank will describe her usage of functional life measurement skills to compare, represent, and describe relationship to objects, time, money, cooking, and calendar skills with 90% accuracy 3 out of 4 consecutive sessions as measured by student work samples and teacher-created assignments. And then it goes down and it breaks it down into even some more specific measurements there. The reason why I took the time to read out all of that is just to show you how specific that goal actually is written. So it's not just saying, I'd like this student to get better in math as it relates to time or money. Like, it's actually broken down. On the right-hand column there, you can see those dates. So it starts with 1/17/20, 3/27/20, and goes on throughout the calendar year. Those are when the progress reports are written. And if we were to continue looking through this IEP, we don't, we just have the snapshot. We would see that under the objectives, it says by January 2020, and then it has the goal written out. It specifies what is needed to do, the student is needed to do to actually make progress in that goal. And then there would be progress note written off to that right again to indicate how much progress the student has made. That measurement, or that objective there that says by January 2020, that whole paragraph will be written out again below that in the IEP for the next date on the progress report, which says March 27th, 2020. And so these are the steps, the objectives that are needed to carry out the steps to meet the goal. We can go ahead to the next slide. And so this is the template for the functional and developmental performance of the IEP. And so it looks exactly like the academic portion, but it is the functional and developmental. And again, it's mapped out the same way. So this is, again, another snapshot of an IEP looking at a functional and developmental. And it's set up exactly the same way as the academic. So again, there's an area of focus here. This one is speech and language. And I think I probably forgot to mention on the other one, it said instructional was the area of focus. But it's important to note what the area of focus is because then it will tell you which staff member is responsible for carrying out those objectives and helping that student meet the goal. So this one, you can see actually has a few more of the objectives mapped out because they were shorter and they fit on our page. But by 1/1/2021, given direct instruction focusing on core language using or use during scripted language and or barrier activities, so-and-so will move from identifying another word and or using descriptive language on an AAC, which is a communication device, to repair communication independently 25% of the time to 60% of the time as measured by data collection, teacher reports, and observation. So that's the goal again. And then those objectives are mapped out right below that. So the March 2020, June 2020, November 2020. And again, all of this, if we scroll back up to the top there, Dylan, I don't know if you can get that, the top of that, was based on the student's present level of functional performance. So that's a key component. You really are unable to develop a goal and necessary objectives without having the knowledge of where the student is presently performing, both academically and functionally.
So when writing and developing IEP goals, it's important to remember that each member of the IEP team contributes to writing these goals. This includes the special ed teachers, therapists, regular education teachers, administrators, the student, and most importantly, the parents. Decisions are made based on team consensus. So we're not expecting you to know how to write goals. I keep stressing that. We're just expecting you to be aware of the process to differentiate a well-written goal from a goal that needs improvement. So the goal should be written using the present level of performance as a baseline. And for each area of concern, there should be at least one goal written. These areas of concern can include reading, writing, math, and social and emotional. Goals must be measurable in order to track progress throughout the school year. So measurable is so important. How do you track when progress is being made? And what is the criteria for measurement? What evidence do you know? What evidence do you need to know to see that progress is being made? So goals also map out the timing of progress reports throughout the year, as Jody had mentioned on the right-hand side in the IEP. Goals identify which team members will be responsible for carrying them out. And then the numbers of goals written are unique to each student's needs. And there's a huge emphasis on unique, as this is an individualized education program. I believe this is, oh, I think you're muted, Jody.
Sorry about that. We're going to look at what SMART goals actually look like in practice. And as Dylan has stated a couple of times now, we are not expecting parents to shoulder the burden of being the ones who actually have to construct and write these SMART goals. But it's really important to have the knowledge of what a well-written goal looks like to ensure that your child's education is best supporting them and meeting their needs. So again, SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-limited. And this is a concept that probably many of you have heard before, applied to other areas of goal development. So we're going to take this concept and we're going to kind of just use it as a guide when we're looking at IEP goals. Okay, we can go to that next slide. Specific. So progress is easier to track when working toward a specific goal. We all know this, right? If we have a lofty goal and it's kind of ambiguous, then it's really hard to track progress being made towards it. So using data and observations to help you create appropriate and specific goals is key. Again, looking back at present level of performance, PLOP, that we've referred to, is really important in creating those appropriate goals. Ask yourself the following to narrow down specifics: who, what, when, why, where, and how. And this is like kind of the overall umbrella for writing SMART goals. So for example, who could be an occupational therapist. Where? Well, it would take place in the occupational therapy room. When? 2 days per week, 30 minutes. What? Maybe to address a sensory diet. How? By providing one-on-one instruction. And why? To address sensory processing issues. So this is just, like I said, kind of an overarching theme of what components are necessary to write a SMART goal. So let's take a look. You know, as a parent, you might say, okay, my goal is to help my kiddo read better. So with this, we have mom and dad's goal is that Adam will be a better reader. How can we make this goal more specific? Adam will be able to read a passage orally in a grade level book at 110 to 130 words per minute with 80% accuracy 3 out of 4 times. That's really different than that initial statement of Adam will be a better reader, right? There's all of these specific tidbits added in that make that an achievable goal with objectives along the way. So we're going to keep talking this out, but that's the difference between a broad concept goal and a specific goal. Measurable. An IEP must include steps to measure a student's progress towards higher goals. The data collected will serve as evidence that the goal will be achieved. And we all kind of intuitively know this, right? How can you measure a student's progress if you don't have a quantifiable way to do so or an objective way to do so? So a couple of tips to make a goal more measurable. One would be to specify performance at a grade or age level on objective tests. So the example we just put for specific had the student reading at grade level. A second tip would be to indicate a rate, such as 5 minutes out of every 10 minutes or 3 out of every 4 times, and a percentage of accuracy, such as 80%. And it's important to note that we would never expect the rate to be 100% because we do need to allow some room for human error. Everybody makes mistakes. And so mastering a goal does not necessarily mean reaching 100%. When developing a measurable goal, the IEP should indicate the following. So what changes in behavior and performance does the team expect to see? There should be something noticeable, right? Even just based on observation, should be able to notice a difference. What goal is what need is the goal addressing? Why do we need to have this goal? What's the purpose of it? And how will progress towards the goal be measured? And so all of these steps should be very clear when you're looking at the goal. Let's take a look. Mom and Dad would like Emma to be able to solve math problems with the help of a calculator. So how can we make this more measurable? This sounds to me like a very kind of realistic piece that a parent would bring into an IEP. Say, okay, well, we really want her to be able to solve math problems with the help of a calculator, right? And that's reasonable. Well, the team should help to develop a goal that is more measurable than that. So a good example would be Emma will be able to solve math problems that involve the computation of fractions and decimals with 75% accuracy with the help of a calculator. So in this instance, we were able to get more specific as well as have a measurable unit here for which to see the progress that Emma is making. And attainable. This is really key. So again, we go back to PLOP, or that present level of performance. Goals that are attainable are written to reflect realistic progress, which a student may be capable of achieving. So always a goal should be written which is within reach or attainable for a student, but also pushes the students beyond where they currently are performing. And again, attainability is based on the present level of where that student is, both academically and functionally. So let's take a look. Jackson will write at grade level with no errors in spelling or punctuation. Well, how can we make this more attainable? For one, we know that no errors, having that written into a goal isn't really attainable for most people. So Jackson will write a paragraph with at least 5 sentences, each greater than 8 words, with no more than 2 errors in punctuation. That is a measurable, attainable, and specific goal. And when I say attainable, there is an implied baseline for this example. We don't know Jackson and we don't know what his current plop is, but this is an example of an attainable goal. So results-oriented. Goals that are results-oriented will clearly state what a student will need to do in order to achieve it. We can think of results-oriented as being the action that the student needs to partake to move forward in progress of the goal. So again, goals should be realistic and within a student's reach, and they need to be relevant to the student's needs in the areas of academic or functional performance. And results should be that part where it's clear what the student needs to actually do to meet the goal. So an example being, during small group activities, Dana will have good eye contact with others. How could we make it more results oriented? During small group activities, Dana will look at the speaker of the group 90% of the time in 4 out of 5 opportunities. So we didn't just say she's got to have good eye contact. Now we've said, okay, she does that by looking at the speaker of the group, right? That's her kind of action there. That's what spells out what she needs to do as a student to make the progress. And then we're looking at time limits. Each goal should include a time limit in which the student will achieve it. This is really important, especially for progress review. And this is how we can start to measure if a student is making enough progress in the allotted time. So time limits allow for progress review and adjustment of goals if necessary, and they are objective measures from which data can be collected and evaluated. And I think when we do the example, it will be a little clearer. So let's take a look. Jeremy will be able to orally explain class vocabulary words with 90% accuracy, 8 out of 10 tries. His progress will be measured through a language assessment. When I hear that goal, I mean, that's a pretty specific goal, but it is missing the time component. So by May 15th, Jeremy will be able to orally explain class vocabulary words with 90% accuracy, 8 out of 10 tries. His progress will be measured through a monthly language assessment. And we can see the difference there. You know, well, that top goal there actually seems pretty specific, and it might even seem attainable. It's actually really not time bound or time limited. And so that's a missing component. And again, I want to say, we're not suggesting that parents should be able to construct the perfect goal. We're just trying to help coach you so that you can recognize if there's a component missing, or if something is not quite right. So in other words, if a student is working too long on the same goal, say for more than one school year on the same goal with little to no progress, then we know that there needs to be an adjustment in the goals and the objectives. And so as parents, to be equipped with the knowledge of what a well-written goal looks like, that can help you to know where to suggest adjustments in your child's IEP goals. We can go to the next slide. So a quick review. This would be just kind of, again, mapping out. A very common example of parents will say, you know, they'll go into a meeting and say, my son, you know, I want my son to learn how to read. That's a great goal. Building upon that, a more specific goal would be, George will learn to read at the 5th grade level. Okay, that's great, that's specific, but I think we can bump it up a little bit. We can add some more of those components that we talked about today, and we can make it a more well-rounded goal. So after 1 year of individualized tutoring each day, George will read at the 5th grade level. Not a bad goal, we're getting closer. Still a couple of components missing that we could add to make it the best, most complete goal that we can. And this last example down here, after receiving individualized tutoring for 30 minutes each day, George will read at the 5th grade level with 80% accuracy as measured by the global composite score of the Gray Oral Reading Test by June 2021. So this is just about as complete as a goal can get. And again, we just want you to be able to recognize what a good goal looks like and to know how to make those requests in an IEP meeting. If you feel like there's a piece missing, there probably is. And so learning to dissect the goals a little bit better will give you the knowledge moving forward to maybe adjust some of those goals so that they're more appropriate for your child. Dylan, do you want to take this one? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. So there are a few tips to remember. A well-written goal will be SMART, as Jody had just kind of went through all the different components: specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-limited. So prepare for IEP meetings by practicing writing appropriate goals for your child. Use up-to-date scores to develop goals. Write goals which are reasonable for your child. Not too easy, but not too challenging. And always make sure that the devised outcome is stated clearly. So when we talk about long-term goals, what do we really mean? Well, I'll just answer that because I guess we're only in a webinar format here, not a meeting. So long-term goals should be achievable within a school year. And as Jody had mentioned a few moments ago, if a goal remains on the IEP for consecutive years, it may need to be rewritten in order for your student or child to reach it within a reasonable time. A goal that carries over year after year may be too broad, or the objectives may be missing the mark. Here are a few great resources to check out. Did you want to go over this checklist real quick, Jody?
Yeah, I think so. Excuse me,
The
1 second. So that chart, sorry, 1 second, I'm actually going to call.
So I have just added both of the links to the chat box. So if you want to follow along, feel free to follow. And I will also bring it up on the screen real quick.
That's great. Okay. So the first one is a chart that we found that's really handy just for kind of concisely laying out all of the terms that we talked about today. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I had it backwards. This is actually a really great checklist. So when you are preparing for an IEP meeting, really good questions to just kind of think about prior to heading into that meeting. So are the goals clear and understandable? Do the goals avoid jargon and undefined acronyms? That's really important, right? Are they positively written? So, with supports, the student will, as opposed to with supports, the student will not. Do the goals reference and line up with your child's plot? We talked a lot about that today. That's really, really important. And do they address academic and social areas that your child struggles with because of his issues? Again, we want to look at why these goals are being written and their purpose. Are they doing what we really feel like they need to be doing? Are they addressing the areas that we really feel like are important? Are the goals standards-based? So again, we talked about Maine learning results today. And if you want more information about what those standards are, you can find that on the Maine Department of Education website. There's actually a link right on there that talks about the Maine learning results. Do the goals address how your child will gain skills, and do they identify instructional strategies? Again, that should happen through the objectives. And can the goals be accomplished within the time frame of the IEP? That should be able to be measured through the objectives and the progress reports. Sometimes personally as a parent, if we're going through the year and we notice that halfway through the year, we've still made no progress on a particular goal, my son has made no progress, then we might look at tweaking that a little bit. We might need to change the supports or the level of accuracy or one of those components to make it more achievable. We're not always going to get it right the first time. We may need to adjust as the student goes throughout the year. Do the goals list ways to measure progress? So again, standardized tests or curriculum-based measurements, screening, even observations can be included there. Is it clear what your child will be able to do when the goals are met? This is really key. You want to be able to identify what the desired outcome is. You don't want to be like, I don't know if the kid's meeting the goal or not. You want to be able to clearly see what that is. Do the goals set ambitious but realistic expectations for your child? This goes back to this concept of goals needing to be attainable so that they're within reach, but pushing the child to kind of a new area, a new limit. Are the goals strengths-based? So do they capitalize on this to help address a need? Ideally, they should. And does your child have a chance to give input on goals and share information about strengths? One of the things that Dylan does as our youth coordinator is he does a lot of self-advocacy teaching to youth. And Dylan, I'll let you just talk about that for a second because you're much more of an expert on that than I am.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about self-advocacy and really kind of bringing it back to self-advocate for yourself. You really need to know yourself. You need to know what you're good at, what you're not so good at, and then how you can kind of build on those things you're not so good at to address your needs. So that is something that we do. We have a workshop that we put on with youth, and we just kind of address those areas and have good old conversations about really recognizing that within yourself, I have these strengths, and my disability isn't necessarily isn't all of who I am. It's just part of me, and it's empowering for the youth to meet with other individuals and have these conversations about their own personal experiences. So you can find some more information about that as well on our website. I think we actually have a training of that self-advocacy webinar uploaded on YouTube as well. So if you want to give that a quick preview, that's an option as well.
And one of the things we do encourage is student participation in IEP meetings. And so this can be as young as kindergarten and all the way through high school. So at a young age, a student may just come for the first few minutes and say hello to the staff and the team. They may read a couple of pages of a book or share a writing prompt or even just a picture that they've drawn or colored. But the idea is to start getting the kids comfortable at a young age to participate in their education planning. And throughout year, as they age, they would obviously assume more responsibility and a greater role in those meetings. But this is a good point on the checklist here. Like, does your child actually have the chance to give input on goals? That's important, I think, especially if you're talking about a high schooler. They really should be able to have some input, have some say in what they think their strengths are and where they need support. And sometimes when we stop to talk to the student for a minute, we can be surprised at their feedback and surprised at the direction that they may want to head, as well as we may think we know our kids. If we don't stop and ask them directly, sometimes we actually may miss the mark. So that last point, if your child is in high school, do the goals include transition planning? This is another bit that we didn't get into today. This is good to keep in mind for the future, but this is a whole other ball of wax, and we actually have workshops dedicated specifically to that transition planning. Just for background knowledge for yourselves, that when a student does enter high school or is 14 years old, it is mandated that a transition plan be created if they have an IEP, if they have an individualized education program. And that transition plan simply outlines where the student, as well as the staff and family, see the student going after high school. And so it is a separate document from the IEP, and yet it usually just kind of gets attached to the back of the IEP. But I'm not going to kind of head down that road right now. That's just kind of good background information.
We do have a webinar coming up on transition planning on December 9th, I believe. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the PowerPoint real quick.
Okay. The other resource that we have listed there, I don't think we need to pull that up necessarily, the chart, but there is a great chart that just kind of concisely maps out SMART goals as it applies to special education and the development goals. And I encourage you to check that out if you wanted to just look at a couple more examples beyond what we presented here today. And then that's pretty much it. We would love to hear from you guys in the chat box if you have any questions or comments or concerns. And then we're going to ask really quickly. We have just an 8-question survey, if you wouldn't mind just filling that out. Because we are grant funded, everything that we do depends on the data we get back from the work that we do. And so we do that by launching surveys. And if you wouldn't mind just taking a second, and there are multiple choice 8 questions, that would be awesome. And we'll hang out here too if anybody has questions. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in the box here, in the chat box. And Dylan, if you want to do the same, if anybody wants to reach out to us afterwards.
And as Jody had mentioned at the beginning, this is our first time giving this presentation, so if you have any pointers, please leave it in the chat box if you think we should address anything else or focus on a certain aspect. We would appreciate it.
And I recognize we may have gone too deep into the specifics. We may have gone too into the weeds. We're trying to really have this be kind of a high level look at well-written goals for an IEP, but we do apologize if we went too specific. We're kind of just trying to figure out how to gauge this at this point since it's new. Okay, great. Thank you, Carrie, for your feedback. So maybe next time we'll actually go through the chart that we have printed out here too, Dylan, that we have listed as a resource.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, especially for preschool, she says. That's great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to hang out just another minute and wait for everybody to submit their polls. But we really appreciate you joining us. And please, as always, feel free to reach out to us after the webinar is over if you have any questions or would like us to direct you to other events for Maine Parent Federation.
And if you don't follow us already, please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Our YouTube has all of our webinars, and Twitter as well. So. And just everybody has completed the poll, it looks.
Awesome. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone. Bye. There's no attendees anyways.
Okay, so that was like, it was a little hard for me to